I got into my first juried show at age 10, though I don't think they realized I was 10 years old, and did try to get me out of that, but my mother pushed through and made them say that I was okay when they had the juried show. I did a lot of performance between the age of 4 and high school, and then went to NYU with a theater degree. And I never really pursued acting as much, little bits in my 20s, but not really. But what I was so fascinated with at NYU's theater program was the study of body language, and so much. I studied so much psychology and how people think and what makes people tick. And for years, I made my living after college as an artist. I created cartoons and did illustrations for magazines and did fine art. But when I finally decided to work with interiors, it made sense to work with just some of the psychological aspects. So that was my art background. And I think for me, with that perspective, I love creating spaces that maybe are a little bit more conceptual. I mean, I love all genres of style. I love bringing someone out in the space. So I try to stay flexible in terms of bringing out someone else's aesthetic and then kind of putting it through my sensibility. But I love artistically kind of creating things that are a little different. And so, yeah, that's been a fun journey for me up until now. And then I do have a lot more in my background that brought me to my crazy way of doing interior design, but the art is just one of them. Yeah, I think it's both. I think that the space influences the way we think and the way we feel about ourselves, and it kind of emulates who we are on an innate level, or can, doesn't always, but I think it has the potential always to do that. I think that it both influences us, and then it also can kind of show me when I go to a client's home in the raw space and see what they've naturally been inclined to do in terms of the things that they've grabbed, and maybe they weren't quite ready for a designer to come and kind of give them an overhaul, but I see a lot about that person. So I think part of it is reading who this person is. I mean, to be honest, most of my practice, of course, is just looking at the aesthetics and bringing out someone's sensibility and bringing a more meaningful layer to the work. But sometimes it's even bringing out a space that will heal people. I had a client who had gone through the loss of her husband and her son. And it was within a few years, and she had never had control of the environment, and was such a beautiful, beautiful woman who had been through so much trauma. So partially the space had no real connection to who she was as an individual. And when I see that, that's not only an imbalance in someone, but that's kind of living in a space that is encouraging your insecurities. And in that case, she was surrounding herself with reminders of trauma. So part of what I did in that first consultation, which was a 7-hour afternoon, she had come to a lecture and had been thinking for a while about remodeling her house. We ended up rebuilding her whole house from scratch almost. It was an extensive remodel. I moved the kitchen from one area to another, and I mean, pushed the ceilings. I mean, just it was extensive and about a year in construction. And at the end of that process, I really found her voice. But it had been one of the first times in her life that she had really loudly put her voice into the space. She always thought that, well, her friends were doing this, so that's what she should do. And when she learned that, no, wait, who am I? Like, no one had ever asked her those questions. What's interesting is that for me, the feel of the space and the look of the space, and of course the authenticity all become kind of blurred into one. So when a client is referred to me, they often kind of are wanting that certain type of feel. And I think just that alone, there's a chess game in the visual, and then there's a chess game to make a space emote. And so the types of clients that want that feel, that feeling that you get really when you're standing in nature, I think it already kind of sets it up to be a certain demographic that may be a little bit more open in general. Not always, but a lot of times it is. And it's run the gamut every which way. I mean, I'm of course don't always spend 7 hours. I sometimes am spending an hour and a half, with someone. But I'm pretty quick on my toes to just observe. With me, I'm by no means a psychologist, but I have, with the study of psychology, just so much. And my mother, her background was a lot of different things. She owns the Shambhala Institute, but one of the, so I grew up with a lot of different spiritual modalities. But before she opened the Shambhala Institute, she was a sensory motor integrative therapist. So she would work on the environment of a state hospital for patients that were stuck in a developmental process. So she had kind of trained me in using psychology on space as well. So I'm quick on my toes to kind of get a sense of the dynamics of the person, the family, the couple. And it's not that I'm there to change their behavior or do anything like that. That's for a psychologist or not. Most of my clients would certainly not need therapy ever. But when I see even that on a superficial level, I can kind of figure out what's going to be a visceral experience for them in their space. So it's sometimes they open up naturally and sometimes they don't. But either way, I can kind of tap that, look inside it, and just see what they're telling me, what they're not telling me. And it's, again, not that I'm doing therapy with anybody, but I'm just kind of lightly figuring out what the best environment would be for them to make their life the best it can be. So many different ways, just depending on the exact job. But yes, I do all of the consultation. So I drive I drive everything with the client and try to figure out what they want and then create something for them. And then in terms of how I show that, it could be anything as simple as a style board or as elaborate as a full rendering. I mean, and anything in between. And then in terms of communicating, interior architectural details, it's usually just, I do it as a drawing. And yeah. And then of course show the materials. One thing that I look for, having done this for many years, is honestly work ethic and integrity. Work ethic meaning ready to just get it done no matter what it takes to make the client happy and make it look and feel good in the end. And then, everybody's human. If something goes wrong, I need to know that the integrity is there. If any of us could make an error, but the bottom line is make it right and resolve it in a way that it has high integrity. So that's another thing that I certainly look for as well. It always depends on the client, on what they want. I mean, sometimes the consultation process is longer, to really fine tune what they're looking for and get it all kind of rounded, with a lot of kind of detailed intricacies. And sometimes it's kind of straightforward. They just love something right off the bat. I mean, it's different all the time. And then the way we do our renderings or style boards or what we need to present is also dependent on, what they would like to see. So it's all kind of, I really like personalizing everything to the client. I'm big, as you can hear. I love getting a sense of how they like to work. I like to kind of, I'm flexible usually with some of those nuances. I'll always say when I feel strongly about something, and I always encourage them to do the same. I want to hear what's important to them, and I'm always going to be looking at where I think we're going to get the best out of all aspects that we've discussed. So, of course, I'll be forthright if I feel like I'll fight hard for something that I think is in their best interest. And that's happened a few times where in the end they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm glad we did that. Having said that, it's also happened where I hear them and I think, okay, no problem. Let's go that way. And that sounds good. And we'll kind of think about it from a different angle than I had anticipated initially. I think it's that communication is key thing.